Hey everyone, welcome to the Cutting Edge podcast where culture meets crypto. Today we have one of the best collectors and thought leaders in the NFT space. Known for his provocative threads on Twitter and his impressive collection of NFTs, he's focused on accelerating the development of the open metaverse, making sure he's providing and nurturing a truly decentralized experience for all users. Please welcome Punk6529. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you. How are you? And thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. I know we chat every once in a while, but I know we're both super busy. Building out the stuff that we've collectively been working on. But I mean, I remember the first time we really chatted was around NFT NYC, and I felt like we had known each other for years because we had a very similar vision of the world and how we wanted to kind of help do what we could to build it out. But yeah, I mean, I guess for those who aren't entirely familiar, and I'm sure there are a couple, but could you just give us, I guess, a little bit of a brief background on yourself and how you kind of came into the NFT space?
I got I came back to NFTs the second time um, in late 2020. So I had seen NFTs in 2017 the first time around. And like I think most people in crypto, I was like, okay, this is cute. It's a fun game for kids, maybe. But it's not anything important. Let's go back to consensus algorithms and smart contracts and all the important stuff, right? And by late 2020, I had a feeling that somehow something important was happening, but I didn't know what it was. Right. So I started lurking in what I think was kind of proto NFT Twitter at that point. Right. And in my other account, obviously. And I'm reading and I was like, okay, this is interesting. I don't quite get it yet, but there's something there. And then there were certain threads that were quite enlightening to me, important to me. One of them was your thread when you bought your ape. And I remember reading it and I think having a normal reaction, like everyone is, was like, wait, is this guy crazy? It, like, uh, how can that be right? But then I read it again and again and a few more times. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. There's something here. I don't know what this is, but there's something here. And then 4156 bought his ape and you know really leaned into him as his identity also, and I was following him and thinking about the things he was saying. Like, okay, that's pretty interesting. And then Perugia bought his alien and had that mega thread. And if you asked me the kind of January to March of 20, uh, what have I lost here? 2021. Yeah,
2021.
2021. Which things stick in my mind? It's those three things. It's your tweet storm, a variety of 4156 tweets, and Perugio. And the combination of these was what dragged me into like, okay, I really have to take a closer look. And for me, a closer look means I've got to start doing things, right? And so it's how I got into Bitcoin in the first place. Like I downloaded a node, I bought a Bitcoin, I sent it to a friend of mine in Europe. I said, oh, that was a very interesting experience, right? And it's interesting because a lot of people don't do it that way. Like one of my very first activities with Bitcoin, even though I think I bought my first Bitcoin either on Coinbase or Bitstamp. I mean, I had to buy it through a centralized exchange.
Yeah.
But one of my very first activities was I downloaded a node, I ran my own node, I sent it to someone, I figured out how to do it, and because I don't think you get a feel for it otherwise.
Hmm.
And this was like, let's say by February, I started um, spending a lot of time on it because I had concluded there was something there, even though at this point I didn't know what that there was.
Yeah, I mean it's very funny because you and I both learned the same way, right? Because when I got into NFTs as well, I remember I learned by doing, right? And I remember the sums that I was working with at the time were like very very small, right? It's a couple $100, a couple $1,000, and I was like, well, I know I'm like not gonna get rich off this and figuring it out. But I really felt like there was something really important here, and that the faster I understood it, the more of an advantage I would have as people start to understand it. I thought it was going to take like years. I didn't realize it would take weeks to months. But it's funny because I think that there's like an important lesson there, right? Whereas I think a lot of times people get stuck in that analysis of the paralysis of analysis of being like, well, I need to completely understand it before like I really jump in. And to me, I was just like, okay, I'm gonna put aside a certain amount of capital that I'm willing to risk to zero to kind of learn how this works. And I felt like you were kind of going through that same learning process yourself once you found the space and started to take it seriously.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I just don't think you always, particularly with technology, I have a general rule of, because, as you get older, your tendency starts to become to dismiss everything,
Mm.
right? And I just have a general rule to like fight because I think it happens to everyone. Like the after a certain age, like, oh well, I don't know.
Mm.
Twitter is dumb, Facebook is dumb, blogging is dumb, Alexa is dumb, NFTs are dumb. Like it's what starts to happen. You're like anything that you didn't grow up with.
Yep.
Well, what are these kids doing? And I actively fight to suspend that and say, I'm going to do things, I'm going to use this without trying to judge if it's a good idea,
Mm.
right? And because if I judge if it's a good idea at first, the answer is always going to be no. Like, of course, we shouldn't be spending $100,000 on a cartoon ape, right? Like, it's ridiculous. Like, what kind of crazy person would do that, right? So you have to fight that. And what I've given myself a permission to do, and it's just like you said, a small amount that goes to zero. For me, it's also like my technology budget. I buy almost any new thing that comes. Like you can sell me almost any new like $1,000 or less technology because I consider it not in my spending budget. I consider it as being part of my education budget.
Mm.
That I believe technology is going to continue to develop. I believe that we're going to have many new developments in technology. And I believe that if I don't stay involved with things, you'll eventually lose touch, as you see happens with parents and grandparents. And once you start losing touch and you fall a generation or two behind, it becomes almost impossible to catch up.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. Sorry. Go.
yeah, and so like I think it's super important. It was, I think, in one of my threads on like how to buy your first NFT, right? Is just spend very little money and just buy one.
Mm.
Don't worry about don't worry about investment gains. Don't worry about anything. Just ignore all that stuff.
Yeah.
Just start playing around with the space. Use throwaway money, right? So it doesn't matter if like you buy quote unquote the wrong NFTs. I mean, it's laughable. I laugh at some of the first NFTs I bought. Like they're pretty funny. But my first NFT was I don't know 0.01 ETH or something. Like, all right, I just want to buy one, see what that's like. So that was kind of the get involved phase. And then by July, I actually had my conclusions, which are very similar to the ones that I have today, which they've, and it's been interesting to me because I wrote some of them down back then.
Mm.
And I go back and look at them now. And I'm like, oh no, I actually still agree with what I wrote in July and August of last year. And my conclusions were first, this is crypto's consumer moment, right? Like there's no, that all technology becomes consumerized when you stop talking about the tech.
Mm.
The tech is just in the background, right? The silly example I keep using, but it's absolutely right. Nobody has ever said, you should use Instagram. It's really great. It uses Python on the back end, right?
Exactly.
Right? It's ridiculous. When you say it out loud, it sounds ridiculous. But 90%, 95%, 99% of all crypto talk pre NFTs was literally the technology. Oh, we do smart contracts. Oh, we have these many transactions per second. We have all these things. And I mean, someone has to think about that, but not the consumer, right? That's not the consumer's problem.
Right.
And so what I saw with NFT is we were talking about something else. Oh, this ape, this alien, this photo, this X copy, oh, this Fidenza. And it doesn't matter what you think about any of them, right? Like it doesn't matter if any of them are good, bad, and different. The important point is you're not talking about a technical thing. You're talking about an application enabled by a technical thing, right? So that I thought was super interesting and very much related was the fact that unlike any prior movement in crypto, existing institutions, companies, universities, nonprofits, religious groups, etc., have a very clear pathway to making money from NFTs, right? They go mint NFTs to their existing fans or new fans and monetize their brand equity. And that's a big accelerant that we didn't have before, right? Because if you're, I don't know, the Catholic Church, and you go to the Catholic Church and say, hey, Ethereum, they might say, oh, congratulations. It's a very interesting invention, young man. But what am I supposed to do with this? Right? Right? Well, and it's true, there's very little they can do with it. And this was the same reaction I was having with my in real life organizations. I'm like, well, I really want to use crypto and decentralized blockchains in my day to day life, and I can't think of anything to do with them. Right? If I can't think of anything to do with them, like very few other people are going to think of anything to do with them. And so I said, all right, it's the consumer moment. That's number one. Number two, which I mean is not hugely important, I think, but it's obviously going to flip in fine art distribution. I'm not going to spend much time on it, but I think that part's clear. But then number three was like, oh, we have a path dependence moment now in all of the technology industry and society, right? And it's the same mental model of Twitter circa 2010, right? Twitter circa 2010 did not seem very important, right? It's the silly service. People tweet about what they ate for lunch. Nobody thinks it's particularly important except some fanatics in San Francisco, right? And there's this active debate at Twitter of should it be a protocol or a service? Because it was somewhere in the middle, right? It really encouraged a lot of third-party applications back then, and you know, Jack Dorsey and Fred Wilson were thinking about it and blogging about it a bit. And you could see that they were very close to going towards protocol, but they didn't quite have the mental model of how to do it then because Bitcoin was just starting. And I think they've both said this, both Jack and Fred have said this, that like if Bitcoin had been more developed and they could have seen that, then they might have gone protocol from the beginning. And if Twitter had been a protocol from the beginning, all of these silly discussions we're having now, because I think they're very, very silly,
With
would have
regards
just been avoided.
to censorship?
Yeah, the question of like, I mean, even just like, think of it very simply, that the question of whether Donald Trump should have an account on Twitter should somehow change based on if Elon Musk is or isn't the major shareholder of Twitter is a very bizarre outcome, right? Like, that's a very strange way to organize society, right? And the reason it's that way, it's because it's a centralized service, right? And that in and of itself is not that important, but centralized services in internet-based businesses with network effects tend to become de facto monopolies. I'm not saying necessarily in the economic sense, but in the practical sense, right? If there were 50 Twitters all about the same size, like there were 50 major newspapers 30 years ago, who cares if on this Twitter Donald Trump doesn't have an account? You have an account on a different Twitter, right? But effectively in the West, there's one Twitter, and whoever the number two Twitter is effectively doesn't matter. And so then it becomes this very strange politicized ground of who should have an account. And the answer is not he should or he shouldn't, right? That it's completely the wrong question being asked, right? The answer is why is Twitter making this decision, right? And the excellent analogy is email. Email is a protocol. There are centralized services. I use Gmail and personally and Outlook at work, and they're 100% centralized services.
Mhm.
But the fact that there's anyone else can operate an email service, including me, myself individually, keeps both the big providers honest because there's always alternatives, right? And also doesn't put anyone in the completely ridiculous position of having to decide of all 8 billion people on planet Earth who's been a good enough boy or good enough girl to have an email account, right?
Right.
Because it's impossible to do it correctly. Like you can start with the best good faith on planet Earth and rank ordering all 8 billion people on Earth on their goodness and badness and drawing a line and saying, you know, these people have been super, super naughty. We're going to take away their email account. And these people are okay. And we're not going to take away their email account. Keeping also into account that like, things change, environment changes. You know, we were sort of semi-friends with Russia a few years ago, and now we're very much not friends with Russia a few years ago. So, like, does the Russian Foreign Ministry lose its Twitter account? Does it lose its email account? It's a bizarre conversation to have, right?
Right.
The best thing would have been for these to be open protocols. And if they're open protocols, then anyone can run their own version of Twitter or email that can decide this person's in, this person's out, I'm going to spam filter them in or out. And the problem, in effect, goes away, right? And so
Do you think? I guess just to interject right there, real quick. Do you think Twitter can become a protocol now, or is it too late? Like, is it?
it can absolutely become a protocol now.
Mhm.
I'm not sure that Elon sees it, to be honest, because I've looked at all his tweets about Twitter, and they're more along the lines of, I'm going to run the human curation better. And I mean, I don't want to say he can't. He's obviously extremely talented and built many, many businesses that people thought were impossible. But I also don't think that's the right answer. Right? I
Right.
don't think that's that. I don't think the right answer is Elon Musk, because there's a lot of smart people at Twitter, right? And a lot of smart people in the trust and safety team at Twitter, right? It's not like, and I don't think they wake up in the morning and say, "Oh, I'm going to be create censorship," and you know, I'm sure all social networks, would be much happier if they could focus on like user adoption and selling advertising and not having their users all be idiots on their service, right? All of this is like, it's not like they wake up in the morning and say, oh, great, I want a bunch of Democrats and Republicans fighting on my service and accusing each other of lying or manipulating or what have you, right? This is a cost to Twitter, not a benefit.
Right.
And so the idea that, and then, he's also said he's going to sell the company in a few years. And so, okay, even if between like building electric cars and flying to Mars and making hyperloops and neural links and solar, he has enough bandwidth to personally fix the algorithm, well, which the algorithm I think is not, maybe can be improved, but it's not fixable in total, right? Like you can't end up with there's no solution that's going to make everyone happy,
Right.
right? There's no rank order of all the people in the world that everyone's going to agree who's naughty and who's nice, right? That's just not, or all the tweets in the world, which one's naughty, which one's nice. That's an
Also,
impossible question.
I feel like just the fact that like you're back at square one, right? Where it's like you still have a person or entity in charge that, okay, maybe one side agrees with them more or less or whatever have you, but like you're still back at the same issue, right? Where it's like, God forbid he gets hit by a bus tomorrow, then like what happens when the next person takes over? Like what's like then you have to worry about successors, and you're kind of going back to like, to use an analogy of like medieval times where it's like as soon as like the king dies, like there's a power struggle for who takes over, right?
Every single, I mean, when we had a print, we used to print things 30 years ago. No one had a monopoly on printing presses, right? So we didn't have this debate of like, even there, I mean, you had, in a way, a more centralized environment because there were book editors and magazine editors and newspaper editors, but there was no way to globally ban someone from printing, right? The fact that you can globally ban someone from tweeting is an issue, in my opinion, right?
Right.
It's like saying you can globally, And if people who think it's not an issue, and I think I'm being, insensitive to trust and safety, should ask themselves if they believe we should also globally ban people from sending emails, right? If there should be a body that can say, G-Money is no longer allowed to send emails. That's it, full stop. And then if there should be such a body, if that body should be whoever controls the board of directors of Twitter from time to time, right? I think the answer to the first question is no, there should not be a body. But if you were going to make such a body, for sure it wouldn't be Twitter's problem, right? You'd have to have some due process, some logical approach, blah, 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 right? And, the answer isn't to turn Twitter into a public utility, right? Like they're a private company. They can do whatever they want in their service, right? Tomorrow they could wake up and just put, pictures of Dogecoin on their servers and that's that, right? It's not the public's job to go take over private companies, right? What the government should be encouraging, though, the government should be pro-open standards, pro-interoperable standards. And the interoperable standards for things of value are actually public blockchains, cryptocurrency. And as far as I can tell, no Western government has figured this out yet, right? Like it is in the public interest that major chunks of societal activities don't end up being determined by the CEO of a private company, right? And so I was like, all right, I had this background in my head. I've always found the outcome we ended up in to be bizarre. And as I'm looking around at NFTs, I'm like, these things could be the building blocks for the quote unquote metaverse, right? And the metaverse is going to be a very big deal. It's just not what people think it is, right? I think if I went and surveyed 100 people and said, what's the metaverse? Because now you read about it in magazines and newspapers and what have you. They think it's going to be some like 3D game and you'll put your VR goggles and play this game, or it'll be like Second Life or something, right? Like a new Second Life, and you'll wear your goggles, and then the next thing they're going to tell you is like, well, I don't want to wear VR goggles all day, and also that's not really for me. I prefer real life and those games, right? I think that's where we are in the understanding and the adoption cycle, right? But that's not for me the metaverse, right? Like the metaverse is just some future version of the internet, but with a couple of distinctions, right? We'll have better visualization, right? We'll have first 3D visualization in the browser, like we have with OM, right? And a variety of other services. In the long run, it's going to be augmented reality, right? Like it's going to be primarily, you'll see digital objects, which could be a conference call or, Fidenza or what have you, overlaid over your field of vision, right? That's where we're going to end up.
How far away do you think from that?
I think for that to be like really, really good, lightweight, pair of sunglasses, long battery life, good resolution, doesn't make you sick, probably 7 to 9 years. As I keep saying 2030, I think it's about there. Now, Facebook, I noticed they're going to come out with a new Oculus that is also, has updated capacity for augmented reality and what have you. But the headsets are still heavy. They're uncomfortable. They're not the type of thing that someone can wear all day, right? And so it's, I basically never put on a headset, right? I have one. It's basically never put on. It's annoying.
Yeah.
Right.
Saying it gives motion sickness. Like, you can only do it for a certain amount of time. I agree with you. Like, I don't think it's around the corner, right? I like my prognosis is I was saying a decade, right? But 7 to 10 years to me sounds about right.
Yeah, that's where we are. If you look at what people are saying in the research labs, if you look at the kind of what's tracking in terms of price performance, it's about there. When your goggles are basically like a pair of sunglasses, right? And like have reasonable battery life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. you're going to wear them all day,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's going to replace your phone,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so what this means is, well, okay, we get a chance to rerun history to see if we've learned anything from the last decade. So one way is to rerun history and make the same mistakes we did before, which is cool, we're going to have this service, it's going to be appealing and useful and addictive and fun, and everything's going to be in Facebook's database. And I have no problem specifically with Facebook, right? You can put any other company.
Mm-hmm.
And if all of this is in Facebook's database, we're back to having all the same problems we have today with social media.
Right. And I,
What's G Money doing there? Is he allowed to do it? Let's review him. Let's do this. Let's do that. And because there's only one reference implementation of the trust and safety algorithm, right?
mm-hmm.
And someone has to make this judgment call again, which is going to have endless problems and endless politicization of something that should not be a problem, right?
Right.
This has been solved before.
And I want to pause you right there, right? Because I think the first time we ever spoke, we both shared like our worldviews of, kind of the way we wanted to see, how we saw crypto and blockchain tech, right? Like I think everything that you said up until this point, for sure, like I agree with all of it, right? Like being like, one, NFTs would be the Trojan horse that takes crypto tech mainstream, right? Like today people are talking about JPEGs, and they're not talking about, oh well, it's on a decentralized ledger. That's part of the conversation because I think it's still really early, but at the end of the day people are buying stuff because they like it, not because the tech is great. And then I think one of the things that we really really bonded over was what you're just alluding to right here, right? Is that the open metaverse, like what do we want the future to look like, right? Like if I buy a t-shirt right now, if I go buy this t-shirt, there's no rules of like what I can do with it, right? Like I can
Yep.
give it to somebody, I can sell it at a thrift store, I can sell it to my friend. There's no like limitation to exactly what I could do. And why, we're currently living in a social media environment where, if this was digitized, there would be a limitation, right? Like I go and play a video game and all I can do is buy it. There's no like resale market, right? And you've seen that happen with a lot of these MMORPGs over the last decade where there is like a black market or a gray market that occurs outside of the game where people are transacting. And it's like, why don't you bring that in like in an authenticated manner, right? Where people can transact and it's safer and people don't get scammed. And I think both you and I, as we started seeing the future of like, okay, well, you should, if you own an asset, you should be able to do whatever you want with it, right? Like just the same way in the physical world, you shouldn't be limited by that in the digital world. And I really feel like that's where you and I, the first time we spoke, we were just like, yeah, like we were just eye to eye on that, right? And and this was about like 9 months ago, I think. And yeah, I think, and I think this gets into what you've been working on with OM, you know?
Yeah, look, this is the Web 2 companies are feudal estates, right? Like you are there at their pleasure. You're a guest on their servers. You don't own anything, right? And they can kick you off at any time, right? And so that is something that I think the average person doesn't understand. I think the average person doesn't have an appreciation of, and I think that to the degree that someone might understand this more or less, it has to do with how much you believe the digital world is a real thing,
Mm.
right? Like there are, I think it's from Chris Dixon that I stole this from, but I'm not 100% sure. But I think there are people who believe the digital world is real and people who don't. And this explains a lot of the gap in communicating with each other, right?
Mm.
They're like, oh, well, whatever. It's just Facebook or it's just Fortnite or what have you. Who cares, right? But I spend many, many hours looking at screens. I collaborate now and certainly post COVID with people around the world, primarily through screens.
Mm.
I have an increasingly digital presence, and I don't think this is going to change. I think it's going to accelerate. I don't think it's not going to happen to other people. It is going to happen to other people. And I think as the visualization gets better, we're going to spend more and more of our professional, personal, social life in digital spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the case, then if the main part of the economy and society is happening digitally, we should be having right now a discussion of how people preserve the same type of constitutional rights that they have in the physical domain, right? And sometimes, when mainstream media sometimes writes about me specifically or crypto in general, oh, they're all a bunch of libertarians and they don't want the state. That's actually not right. The state that uh, I believe in is a constitutional democracy, right? And the state, that means that you can do certain things, not unlimited, but within pretty broad parameters, unless there's some reason you're not allowed to do those things, and that reason has to have a rationale, a due process, a way to challenge it, or what have you. And since those rights only apply vis-a-vis the state, right? If you end up just working, living your life in private spaces, corporate spaces, non-state spaces, all those things no longer apply, right? You have no constitutional rights to do whatever in, Facebook's metaverse. Nor
Right.
do I think should you, right? Like, it would be weird. Why would it's like saying I have a constitutional right to come hang out in your living room. No, I don't have a constitutional right to come hang out in your living room and yell about the open metaverse. You can tell me, thanks, it's been 3 hours, you need to go home, right? That's totally fine and normal. But that means we need to preserve some public spaces. And the public spaces of things of value in a digital world are public blockchains, right? Crypto assets, cryptocurrencies. That's the public square. And if we then build on, invest in, continue to develop the public square, then it's fine for there to be centralized services, right? Like, you can build centralized services on top of decentralized services, but you can't do the opposite, right? So, like, if someone asks me, like, should, some big gaming company build a great centralized game? Yeah, that's fine. I have no objection to that, right? There's many things in life that are centralized, and
Mm-hmm.
many things in life that will always be centralized. But the underlying rails should be decentralized. Like, the public environment should be decentralized. So you have a choice of living somewhere else, right? Living your digital life somewhere else.
Right. And I think that goes deeply into the crypto ethos, right? Where even with like self custody, right? People are like, oh, well, I don't want to self custody. I'm like, that's great. There's plenty of custodians you can use to custody your coins, right? Your tokens. You want to have that option, right? Because those options don't necessarily exist in the current environment where it's like, okay, well, you have to use a custodian if you want to use financial rails. And it's just really having that option of where you want to fall along that line, right? Either total self custody or using a custodian in some way, shape, or form. But the key is having that option.
Yep, exactly right.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess I'd love for you to kind of talk about OM and exactly what you're working on there because I know this is right in the spirit of that.
Yeah, so what we're trying to do there is the following. And it's, can we create a metaverse, or in this case, I mean, for now, I think it's a three-dimensional space, right? But it's what people use for metaverse for now, and that's fine. I think this is the state of where we are today. At
Mhm.
some point, these are going to hybridize with the real world, but we're not there technologically. So let's think of it as a 3D visualization space, right? That adheres to these open principles of the cryptocurrency world, right? And this is actually very challenging because the more complex an application is, the harder it is to keep everything decentralized, right? And so the you got to think of, in the case of a open metaverse, there's actually multiple dimensions you have to think about, some of which are technical and some of which are social slash economic. I'm going to describe both of them in terms of what's the vision we're trying to accomplish, right? So the technical piece, you should think of it in layers. There's three different layers to the technical piece. The one is the positioning grid, where things are relative to other things. This is pretty easy in the scheme of things. This can be on a blockchain. This can be on chain. So that grid can be on chain. It will be 100% decentralized. There's no particular challenges in doing that. The second bucket is, well, where are the things that you see, right? And the way OM works is it runs locally in your browser, rendering a GLB file. Right? A GLB file is an open source file. It's a 3D open source file type. And what's super interesting there is that browsers are very decentralized. Right? Anyone has a browser. And open source 3D files are also pretty decentralized. And, we have a long experience that preventing files from moving around the internet is hard, right? Files are pretty censorship resistant. And this is, yes, there are kind of classic crypto solutions like IPFS or Arweave, and that's one approach. But, it could also, you could imagine it even more broadly, thinking about BitTorrent, thinking about, look, in the very extreme scenarios, right? Sneaker nets work, right? You put a bunch of files in a USB and pass them around, right? So, and I raise this in contrast to what most of the metaverses are, and most of the games, and most of these things, which are, we're going to run Unreal Engine, and we're going to run it on a server farm somewhere. And by the way, this is great. Unreal Engine's spectacular, right? But it will end up being centralized.
Right.
Right? Anything that's of the model, we're going to run these servers, we're going to pixel stream them. There is a single point of failure, and that's the place streaming it to. And so that's not something I wanted to work on because I'm very comfortable. Many, many firms will aim to make centralized metaverses or games. And, people I think are using this quite interchangeably. I think a lot of times people say metaverse, it's really some form of a game, right? I think of metaverse as kind of being a lot more neutral in their application, whereas the games tend to have a very specific lore. And that's fine. I mean, gaming is a wonderful industry, right? But a metaverse shouldn't have as specific an aesthetic as specific a lore. So kind of the second part is like, we're just going to pass some files around. And, rendering these in the browser presents significant technical challenges and always will. But it's what's needed to keep things decentralized, right? That's the kind of second layer. Then the third layer are things that I call higher order services. Gameplay, audio, video, chat, these types of things. Now, some of them you can do decentralized, but at a cost, like purely decentralized, peer-to-peer, but at a performance cost. And so the hypothesis here is that these will be federated. So what do I mean by that? Let's say you have chat. You can say, I want to you have a space. You've made your G-Money space. You can decide in your specific space which chat server to use. You can go totally P2P, or you can use a provider, right? You can say, look, I'm going to use OnCyber for chat, right? Or I'm going to use some other firm for chat. Or I'm going to, I have super high privacy needs. I'm G-Money investment banking services, right? I don't want anyone to see my chats in my space because I'm talking about M&A and well, I'm going to run my own chat server, right? So I know the only person seeing these chats is me, right? So the idea is the interrelations are on chain, the spaces are files, and the services are plug in, plug out, right? So that means even if It means you can get the benefit of scale from the services, right? If someone has a nice looking service, you can use it.
Right.
But you can opt out, just like email, right? Oh, Gmail gets shut down for some reason, that's fine. I can use a different email provider, right? It's not the end of the world, right? So that's the, let's say, technical architecture. There's some like social economic architecture part that I think is also important. The first piece of that, it has to be economically accessible, right? The idea for me that we're going to build the open metaverse, but the entrance ticket is $3 grand, $10 grand, $30 grand, $50 grand, for me makes no sense whatsoever, right?
Right.
Like there's, it's
It just
bad
doesn't
for,
scale. It just
what's that?
doesn't. It doesn't scale when you do that.
It doesn't scale. Like it's bad for inclusivity, but it's also, I think, bad as a business model,
Yeah.
right? Like Facebook is going to come and say, I mean, if I think about like the most likely successful closed metaverse, it's Facebook because they're starting 2.5 billion users.
Mhm.
Facebook is for sure not going to say, hey, you can use Horizon, but you need to send me $30 grand just to like even see what it is, right? Like even to have a chance to build it. They're definitely
Right.
not going to say that,
Well, even
right?
I mean, like to that point, right? So very similarly, like I always use the analogy of Instagram, right? Like, what would how would Instagram have gotten sold? What was it, I think $1 billion when they got bought by Facebook? Would they have gotten sold if every incremental Instagram profile picture was more expensive, or even if you had to pay like $1 or like 10 cents or whatever it was, right? Like it just you don't have those economies of scale because people are like, all right, well, why am I going to pay when I don't know anything about it, right? Like, why am I going to pay that entry fee where I don't even know if I'm going to like it?
If Instagram was done the way most of our crypto friends have done metaverses, just setting up an Instagram account would be 10 grand.
Yeah.
And if you said, hey, look at my cool app, Instagram, oh, I'd like to sign up for this account. Okay, how much is it? It's 10 grand. There'd be no Instagram, right?
Yep.
But that's what we do to people, right?
Mhm.
Oh, you got to buy land. It's 1 ETH, 2 ETH, 10 ETH, whatever. Now, might some quote unquote land become valuable? Sure, in the same way that like Kim Kardashian's Instagram account is valuable.
Mhm.
But the part that's valuable is all the work she put into it.
Right. The creator.
The creator.
Yeah.
The creator can create value in it. It's
Mhm.
not that the land itself should be particularly valuable. It's not like the any opening up another entry in the database of Instagram should have any particular value, right?
Right.
None.
And that's like,
So,
yeah, to that point too, like I guess a real world example that I use as well is in the real world, right? Like what are if you take a look at like some iconic like rock concert venues, and I'll take CBGB's in New York City as an example,
yep,
right? Like its location doesn't matter. It could have been located in the Lower East Side, the Upper West Side, whatever. What makes it so iconic was the experiences that were had there, right? What the owners of the bar did and how they curated a certain type of culture from a certain time period. That's what makes that location valuable, not where it was located exactly, right? And like that to me, it's like I don't think I've seen that really transfer over to a lot of metaverses just yet.
yep, yep.
Mhm.
So, so I think it's got to be economically inclusive, right?
Mhm.
And then I think you need to have self sovereignty. Now, what do I mean by that? So we have this the way is architected, let's say, is you have districts and spaces, right? And the space is also the district's also a space. It's just another GLB file.
Mhm.
So I spend 8 months making the museum district, right? And that's one form of visualization, one form of thing. Like, oh, it's a great place to, I think, show NFTs. I think it's really nice visualization of NFTs. But like other districts can look totally different, right? And each district is sovereign. So a district could decide to be decentralized or centralized, right? Right now, the 6529 Museum District, because I have no other way to do it yet, is centralized. I can decide. I want to put this building here. I want to move this building, right? I can decide. I want to use this chat server. I want to use this other chat server. Right now, in time, some districts might be community run, right? That there'll be a DAO or what have you managing. But just like land shouldn't be particularly um, hard to get a hold of, neither should districts. Like, people don't like how XYZ district's being run, no problem. make another one,
Right.
right? If you want, I mean, what I'd love to see in the fullness of time, right, is districts with very different, not just aesthetic differences, actual real differences in values,
Mm.
right? Like you might have a district that has, I don't know, I mean, there's going to be a neighborhood in the museum district of nude photography. That's great. And you can imagine, let's say someone has a district for nude photography, and for certain people, that's wonderful, and it's a plus, and it's a beautiful thing, right? But you could have another district that wouldn't want any of that, right? That has conservative religious values. That's absolutely fine, right?
Right.
That's the whole idea of just like you can have a website that is, this is the website of the Mormon Church, and here's a website of nude photography, and those websites can live their life in peace, right? Without having someone making a global decision of should you have one or the other,
Right.
right? So this kind of social architecture that people can run, or not really people, I mean, I think communities can run their own district, because I mean, a district of one is going to be pretty lonely, right? And I think people also underestimate, I think the NFT world underestimates how much we need to scale for these things to have any chance of working, right? Like if you use the analogy of Instagram, and I think it's the right analogy. I think metaverses are social networks,
Mm.
and social networks are interesting if other people are using them, and they're very, very uninteresting if nobody's using them. And so even the typical PFP community is barely enough to get to a district as they are now, right? Like it's 10,000 PFPs, it's 4,000 holders, right?
Mm.
Maybe 2,000 of them are primarily identify with the PFP, right? Like I own PFPs from many collections,
Right.
but I use Punk6529. I have, let's say, two cool cats, but like the reality is I'm not investing lots of my personal time in the cool cats community. I think they're
Right.
cool, that's why I bought a couple, but like I'm
Mm.
not deeply invested in that community,
Right.
right? Um, so maybe, I don't know, half of them are deeply invested, that's 2,000. Maybe you tell them, hey, you want to do metaverse stuff? Half of those, that's 1,000. How many are going to go in every day? I don't know. Half of those? A third of those? Are they spread around the world? Sure. So divide that by 24 hours. So maybe there'll be like 10 people, 20 people in at any point in time in a
Right.
typical PFP community, which is still very small, right? Like 10 people isn't a metaverse. It's like your family's chat group on Facebook, right?
Right.
So the part of what I'm comfortable saying, a lot of metaverses that are, or games or what have you, that are like at the PFP level, like the tip, and I mean, like you see a lot of roadmaps of like particularly smaller PFP projects. Like, oh, I'm going to make a game. I'm going to make a metaverse. The problem with these things, they might be fun for a while, and then like people get bored of them. You're going to go in there. No one really is going to be in there. There's not going to be that many new experiences, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think they're going to fade out, unfortunately, right?
Mm.
And so I think the second part is self sovereignty, and like I think some level of scale. You need scale for this to
Right.
work. I mean, the whole NFT space is like 1 million people or something, right?
Right.
We
So
probably need 100 million people to have a shot.
yeah.
And so if you need 100 million people, I go to my third point that it has to be viable for non crypto nerds, right?
Mm.
So one of the nice things about this model, browser spaces, etc., you can go in and you don't need an Ethereum wallet to start having interesting experiences. And I think
Right.
that's important, right? Because any onboarding flow that starts with like, oh, you don't have MetaMask, you don't have Ethereum, go to Coinbase, wait 3 days, send it to this, private keys, Trezors, Gnosis, scams, hacks, gas, this, the other. By the time you've gotten through all this, the person's already gone somewhere else, right?
Right.
Right. So there's got to be a way that you get people involved easily. And then if you're delivering value to them, if they find it interesting, if they find it that it's something that they care about, then they'll eventually go up the curve like we all did of like, oh, how do I buy an ETH and how do I install MetaMask and wait, how do I buy NFT and how do I speed up gas and all these
Mm.
silly slash annoying things. it's better that they come later in the onboarding flow,
Right.
right? If they come at the beginning, it's too much of a burden, I think, for a mass market consumer,
Yeah.
right?
It's
You
easy
gotta
when.
hook them. You gotta hook them with something else.
Yeah.
You've come in and you've walked around a museum. You've gone to a DJ set. You've gone to a cool party. You've had some nice experience of some type. And with that nice experience of some type, um, you get excited, and then later you'll go down the curve of learning how to do all these things. So
Right.
my view of the path to pendants is we have between 6 and 24 months, but not like 5 years,
Mm.
to get tens of millions, maybe 100 million people on board. It's something like that. Because once we have those on board, then the fact that corporations are going to do drops, right? Like, I mean, you're one of the people who brought traditional corporations to a drop, right? You got Adidas to do a drop.
Mm.
Imagine it's a year and a half from now, and there's still a million people on ERC 721, but there's 100 million people on like the Facebook digital object drop, right? That's not, looks like an NFT, but it's not really an NFT. Well, I think the normal corporate incentive would be to drop it where 100 million people might buy it, right?
Exactly.
Not where a million people might buy it.
Mm.
And we have to actually win in the market this time. You can't, I, I am very comfortable that just explaining people why decentralization is important is not going to change their behavior,
Right.
right?
Yeah, because
People
people,
do,
yeah, people want to do what's convenient, right? So as
yeah,
much
what's
as.
fun, convenient, solves problems that they actually have. Um, and so that's the challenge, and it's a big level up for the crypto industry, right? Because the crypto industry is primarily like, it dangles economic gains, right? I think to a large degree.
Mhm.
And then because economic gains are there, people fight through like endlessly horrific user experiences,
Exactly.
right? Like the user experience is horrific. But once you get to things where you're not like, hey, there's no reason to believe that coming and doing things in a 3D space should make you a millionaire, right? Like, why would that be the case, right?
Mhm.
Any more than like using Instagram is going to automatically make you a millionaire. I mean, if you're Kim Kardashian, it will make you a multi millionaire, right?
Right.
But she did the work,
Right.
right? Just making it, you know, I opened up an Instagram account. I'm now rich. Right? Doesn't make any sense when you say it that way, right?
Right.
But there's some sense that, oh, maybe it's going to be that way with Metaverse, NFT type things, but it won't be, right? Why should it be? Where's the money coming from? Where's the value coming from? Who's paying for it, right? And so we have to actually do the hard work of finding experiences that people value and keeping in mind that most of the people we need to bring on board isn't even people like you, right? Like, I figure I'll probably I'll succeed at onboarding people like you.
Mm.
And then we'll be like 3 months from now, and I've onboarded people like you. And now we got to onboard, like, I don't know, my, this is going to be stereotypical for a second, like my mom or something,
Right.
right? Or like uh, a 22-year-old who's never even thought about crypto.
Mm.
And what are the experiences, messages, activities that are going to work for that person? I think is a process of discovery. I don't think anyone's nailed it yet. I don't think any of the services have done it. Hasn't yet. And this is why has been launched in um, this model that, like, I'm calling it an alpha, right? They didn't sell anything to anyone. Come in free, right? What are we doing right now? We're going through an exercise of figuring out what works.
Mm.
And this is the actually right way to do product market fit, right? You got to do customer discovery. You have to try things. All the things I'm going to go off for 2 years and build a super cool metaverse or game or whatever, and then come and everyone's going to love it. I mean, maybe it'll work, but if it works, it's like lightning strikes once. Like, it won't it won't as a class of ways work.
Right.
Right? If like 100 people do it that way, 97 of them will fail.
Right. Yeah,
Right?
because
Because
people are trying to project their image of what the metaverse should be like instead of listening to, what people are actually doing.
correct. That's all. Right now we're in an exercise of like, come in, we'll do whatever we can to help you come in, and let's see if there is anything interesting, fun, economically productive to do, and we'll see what people want to do, try and like create those types of features or experiences and see if that works. And I think there's another aspect here I hinted at before, and this isn't what I'm about to say. It's not a competitive thing. It's just a different thing. Like has no lore per se, right? You can come in and say, I'm going to make, uh, ape ape town, right, with your G Money ape, and can have very heavy lore, or the Mormon Church can come in and put a temple, right, or someone can come in and do something completely different, and that's someone can go and have like an office, right, a totally boring office, and like have team meetings there, right, like and I think that's important because if you're meant to be the open metaverse, you have to be neutral. You can't say like you have to operate under my own aesthetic branding, interests and desires. I mean, there's things that I like that are expressed somehow in the 652 Museum District, but like I know my tastes are just my tastes. That's not everyone else's tastes. And
Right.
my tastes are likely like boring and niche as opposed to actually being like really what people on average will want, right? So we this is an exercise in figuring those things out, seeing what works. And, I am going to say this part is a little bit of a challenge to all of us. And it was the same type of challenge. Like, I know a lot of 2013 era crypto people. That was my class. I'm class of 2013, right? And when I first got excited about NFTs and decentralization, I started calling them over the summer. And I'm like, oh, I've got to do a bunch of stuff, and send me some ETH too. And they're like, oh, it's going to take a few days. I'm like, why is it going to take a few days? Well, I've got to call so and so and get it out of the custodian and blah 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 blah. Like, wait, you're like hardcore crypto guru, right? Like crypto decentralization guru. How can all your ETH be in a custodian, right? Because it's okay for like people to use custodians. There's no objection to that. But if you're like hardcore crypto, you should at least have some in a decentralized space under your own self custody, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And the same thing applies to all of crypto Twitter, right? So all of crypto Twitter believes strongly in decentralization. Okay. We communicate using Twitter, centralized. Discord, centralized. Zoom, centralized, right? I mean, in any type of serious discussion with, of digital rights and corporations and the state, we're just guests in someone else's house,
Right.
right? And we could get kicked out at any point in time. And so at least the people, while I believe in general when we reach out to the community, the world at large, decentralization can't be the pitch. It has to be like, this is fun or interesting or you can get a direct benefit from it. I think from our community, where I think there is a phase now of experimentation and building and trying things and investing some mental energy, right, to figure this out, that I think we should invest that in decentralized spaces. Because if we don't care enough to figure it out, no one's going to figure it out, right?
Right.
Right? Like if the type of people who have been drawn to crypto over the last decade have made huge investments, time wise, maybe money wise, psychologically wise, right? Like values wise in this concept. can't be bothered to figure it out, like we're never going to make it, right? So,
Right.
and this is where I'm trying to, whatever, to some degree, lead by example. Right?
Right.
Took a lot of grinding to even get to this version, and I think there's a lot more ahead of us. But I think it can be really interesting, and I think we have the window is now. I I I don't think I mentioned this here. I don't know if we talked about it, but like I had a long, hard decision with myself in July of last year of if I was even going to boot up 6529. Because I have a pleasant life. I like my life. Right. And by July, I had and I wasn't short of things to do in my life
Right.
in July. It wasn't like, oh, I've got nothing to do. Let me go tweet 20,000 times. Right. The and I had plenty of NFTs, and so I was like, oh, okay. I think if NFTs work, I'll make a nice return on buying NFTs, and I like my NFTs, and I like the art, and I generally don't like selling things anyway. Like it's not even much like it's not like I liked selling things, but and then Bitcoin got me to hold them. I generally don't like selling things. I like buying things. I don't like selling. And so I could have just went along and had a nice time. And I said, I'm going to feel like a hypocrite because if I think there's a window, I think that window is now. And just sitting around complaining that other people aren't taking the lead on decentralization is not a thing, right? Like the world could be exactly as decentralized as we wanted to, right? Like if we all organized and got everyone to vote for a different set of politicians that wanted to vote for the types of things we want, we could change the world. But if we don't do any of those things, then we get the world we actually deserve, right? Like we get the world that is designed by the people who do the work. The CEOs of the Web 2 companies are extremely smart, extremely talented, extremely hardworking. They're doing the work, right? Like their outcomes are deserved, right? They didn't like roll out of bed and someone handed them an empire, right?
Right.
They have that empire because every day, every night for years or decades, they've been fighting to get the world to believe in their product, their service, their social construction, and it worked. And if we don't do the same, it won't work, right? Like it's not like we can just hope it automatically happens. We got to do the work. And so, um, I decided I would feel like a hypocrite if I didn't do it, and which is why I did it. So I was like thinking about it, I'm like, oh my god, this is going to be so much work. I'm not going to sleep for the next 2 years. Uh, but
It's it's so funny because I was kind of having the same discussion in my head when I did it, right? When I started G Money, right? Where it was just like, oh, this is gonna be a lot more work. But to your point, it's like if I don't do it, like can I totally trust whoever comes behind me to have the same intentions that I do, right? And it's like I know what my intentions are and what I want to accomplish for the space, right? And what I think would is probably what I think would be the best outcome, but I can't be guaranteed that, the next person has the same thoughts. And that to me was kind of like the tipping point where like, fuck it, just go for it. Right. And it seems like you kind of had that same thing.
yep, 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 yep. That's exactly it. So I don't know. I think we have an opportunity. I think it's not. I think it's doable. It's challenging, and I think we've got to do it now. And we've got to like kind of hurry a little bit. Like I think this year is very important.
Hmm.
Like if this year we have to have like my mental model, my kind of timeline is that by June, July, I want to have a few hundred or a few thousand people who are not me somehow participating in right? And some of them
Hmm.
just could just be have spaces in the museum district. That'd be the easy way.
Right.
Kind of later in the summer, we have a bunch of communities, most of them PFP related, about um, who should have their own districts. And so by early fall, I think we'll be looking at something 5, 10 times bigger, right? And at that point, what I'd like to see is activity, right? Like I think the KPI, the OKR is like, is there activity? Do people do things there? Because if there's no activity, all of the games, metaverses, etc., that have high valuations but no one's in there, that's not sustainable, right? Like ultimately, value in internet companies, internet businesses, network businesses comes from activity, human activity, right? Without human activity, eBay would be a zero, Google would be a zero, Facebook would be a zero, Twitter would be a zero, right? It's not the technology, it's the technology enabling human activity, right?
Right.
And then that means like by fall, you know, Ryan, the CEO of On Cyber, and I are like working on like kind of some of the technical stuff and which things need to be open sourced and which things need to be on chain and what have you. And so I'd like to be in a position by the fall to say like, all right, here it is, fully ready to be more open, right, and be more decentralized. But we got to sort out like, does it work, right? I
Right.
mean, I am the exact, I think, opposite, and this is how I constitutionally am, but I think this is the right way. I could sell you a whole bunch of stories and how it's going to be the awesomest metaverse or whatever. And I read a lot of those press releases from or tweets from many projects in the space. And honestly, I roll my eyes, right? Because anyone who's going to invent A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and today has no users in it, has no idea,
Exactly. Yeah,
right?
they don't have the clientele to even test what their idea is going to do.
You don't know. Some of them, someone will come up with good stuff. I don't disagree with that.
Mm.
But all the like press release, it's going to be the next this or that, all that type of language, it's nonsense. You learn by doing. You learn by like getting people to use things and finding out. Do you remember, were you in the Twitter era where it was text messaging?
No, that was before my time.
Yeah, I remember when Twitter was text messaging. And it was, wonkier than it is now. And like the fail whale was a big thing for many years, right? I mean, service would go down all the time. And you didn't, we didn't have retweeting. We didn't have media. It was just like a text message. You actually had to send a text, right?
Right.
And but you saw from there that there was a core of a idea, a core of an experience. What I believe is the case, and we're seeing it now, I think there's an interesting form of presence that exists in Om, and we're seeing it now. Like we did that DJ set; it was interesting. We did some artists are launching their new one of ones. It's interesting. Like is it more interesting than Twitter Spaces for those things? I think it is. Is it more interesting than just tweeting it? I think it is. What type of thing is it? A little bit of visualization, a little bit of presence, a little bit of like a little bit of Discord, a little bit of Twitter Spaces. And to me, my gut is that there's something new there. That's something that I haven't felt in an internet experience before.
Right.
And I think the question is like, all right, can we work with that, try it, experiment with it, and see how it, if it can in fact blossom. And
Right.
I think that's what the next 3 to 6 months are going to be.
Amazing. I'm gonna have to wrap it up there. I could go on talking to you all day, uh, but I'm running late for my next call. The For people in the audience that want to find out more, what's the best place for them to go to find out more about everything that you're working on?
Well, I think the best place to go is to 6529.io for everything, because that has information about everything.
Mhm.
For Ohm specifically, there's a form on 6529.io that if you want a space in Ohm, just fill out the form, and then that means we won't forget you. We'll reach out to you, and then you can join the Discord as well. I mean, the Discord is a little bit chaotic right now, but if you also fill out the form, eventually someone will in fact reach out to you. And right, everyone's welcome. So I think it's going to be a very interesting experience.
Amazing. Thank you for the time. I really appreciate it. I always learn so much when I talk to you. So I'm excited for everything that you're building and looking to do my part, of what I can to help you in that vision because I think it's super important to the space. So thanks for coming on 6529, and thank you everybody for listening.
Well, thank you for having me, and it's always great to chat, my friend.
Amazing. Thank you so much.